I commonly get the question of, I've heard of the term will caveat. What's a caveat, and what does it do, and how do I avoid it? So will caveat is when someone challenges the validity of a will, either that it was executed improperly, that the formalities that are normally required in North Carolina were not followed when executing the will, or that the person who created it did not have the capacity to create the will. You can also have a situation where a beneficiary is challenging for reasons of undue influence on the testator, the person who's creating the will, in that one of the other beneficiaries unfairly influenced them to make a decision with their will that they normally wouldn't have without the influence. So those are usually the two types of challenges or caveats that are filed with the clerk of court to challenge a will. So the first is that the person was not in the state of mind or have the legal competency to create a will. So either they had cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, those sorts of things, where they just legally can't execute a contract at all, let alone a will. So what was done is not legal. So if that's the case, then the will would be voided. The other is going to be undue influence or something in the formalities of the will. So that maybe you have a couple children as beneficiaries. One of them is a caretaker over a parent, and by virtue of that is able to exert a little more influence over the parent than the other beneficiary, and as a result, the influence resulted in the will being favorable to the person exerting the influence to the detriment of the other beneficiary. So if that's also the case, then the will can be voided. So the real driving factor or the reason why someone would challenge or file a caveat for a will is if they were set to receive a larger benefit in the will, or if there was no will at all than what they were actually given in the will. So if you have two kids and they were expecting to have everything split 50-50, and it ends up that one was given 75%, the other was given 25%, then the one receiving 25% may challenge the validity of the will on the basis that either the testator was unduly influenced or lacked capacity to create the will. And the reason for that is they stand to make a bigger share if there is no will in place. So if they're able to void the will, then they're able to get 50-50, which is much better than getting a quarter. So the way that we prevent caveats ahead of time is during the planning process, and first and foremost is if you're going to put something in place, use an attorney, because an attorney having some experience with dealing with these sorts of issues will be able to spot red flags. And the first is going to be the competency issue. So if when meeting with the client there's any sort of indication that they have any sort of competency issues, the attorney is normally going to recommend that a physician review and evaluate the client prior to doing anything legal to make sure that they have the legal ability to do it, if they have mental capacity. So if there's an undue influence issue, then normally an attorney is going to want to meet individually with just the client, the person who's going to be the testator, the creator of the will, and exclude any beneficiaries from sitting in on the meeting as well. And that's kind of an issue, especially when you have elderly individuals who may be reliant on children, adult children, to help them out. You can get a situation where the client, the elderly individual, is not really controlling the situation. The child may be really driving the ship on getting the ball rolling, and maybe through that exacting their own intentions or their own wishes, which may not be consistent with what the testator wants. So that's another issue where a lawyer can kind of play the gatekeeper and exclude that undue influence so that only the testator's intentions are being reflected in the will. So those are your basic situations where a caveat may happen or where a will may be potentially voided. And that's how you avoid them.